At least 6 civilians have been killed by Russian shelling in the eastern Ukrainian town of Toretsk. The State Emergency Service says it's pulled 5 bodies out of the rubble of a 2-story building. People are believed to have been sheltering there when it came under attack. Toretsk has been targeted as part of Russia's offensive in the Donbass region. Meanwhile, Ukraine's army says that there is a high possibility of Russian missile attacks across the whole country.
In the south-but direction, the enemy is firing from tanks, barrel and rocket artillery along the contact line, is conducting aerial reconnaissance by UAVs, continues to equip additional lines of defense. There remains a high level of threat of missile strikes throughout the territory of Ukraine.
Well, for more on this, let's cross live to Lviv and join Arise AP correspondent John Gambrell. Good to see you, John. So, top security officials who were suspended pending an investigation have now been dismissed. How has it come to this?
This moved really quick. Over the weekend, President Zelensky made the decision to dismiss the prosecutor general, as well as the head of the SBU. That's their internal security force. Later, as you mentioned, they said that they suspended them, but then today the Ukrainian parliament overwhelmingly voted to fire both from their positions. This may have been a long time coming. There were rumors that there were problems between Zelensky and the prosecutor before the war even began. This prosecutor is known for putting these Russian soldiers who they've captured on trial for war crimes. Now, the head of the SBU is actually Zelensky's childhood friend who ran his presidential campaign. The fact that Zelensky was willing to fire him comes after the SBU, which came out of the Ukrainian KGB, just has been rocked by controversies over the years, from human rights abuses to losing the Crimean Peninsula in 2014 in the initial Russian invasion of Ukraine, to losing the city of Kherson in southern Ukraine. There's rumors that the SBU regional chief there had actually just defected to the Russians and walked away, allowing the Russians to take the city. And it just comes as Zelensky is trying to solidify his power base ahead of what appears to be a coming offensive in the south of the country against the Russians.
Well, again, it sounds like a really bad time for Ukraine. I mean, what's been the reaction of the populace to all of this?
We saw the Ukrainian parliament. Now, I have to caveat that there aren't any pro-Russian parties anymore in the Ukrainian parliament, but everybody else who was there basically voted for this decision today to back Zelensky. Zelensky remains a very popular wartime president here, which is quite a change in his life. You may remember that he was on a Russian language comedy show about Ukraine in which he actually portrayed being the president of Ukraine. He campaigned on that and ran on that as being a reformer, sort of a change artist in this country that has been governed largely by oligarchs and their backed candidates. Now, Zelensky, before the war started, had tried to downplay the idea of the Russian invasion. Now he is at war with Russia. Russia is targeting Kyiv at the start of the war, trying to take over the government. The fact that Zelensky is making these moves now, to some analysts, suggests that he feels comfortable enough in power to make these decisions now, and that it's going to be able to firm up his power base as the country moves forward in the war.
Meanwhile, John, the ongoing onslaught across various parts of Ukraine continues amid warnings that from the Ukrainian army that there is a high possibility of Russian missile attacks across the whole of Ukraine.
That's right, Charles. This has really been a real threat lately. The Ukrainian officials, you have to keep in mind that we've had over 145 days of war, and the Ukrainian public, to a large part, is tired. They hear these air raid sirens. Some people go about their daily business, but the Ukrainian authorities are warning people, when you hear the sirens, even in Lviv, in the far west of the country where I am, that you should take shelter immediately. And part of that is because the Russians are beginning to use cruise missile attacks to target areas of the country that largely are hundreds of kilometers kilometers away from the front line or haven't actually seen direct combat. We've seen this attack in Vinnytsia, which killed at least 25 people and wounded over 100 others. That's southwest of Kyiv. That's hundreds of miles away from the front line. And it's just as in danger as these towns that we've talked about before in the east, like Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, all these areas that the Russians have been trying for weeks now to take without success. So it just goes to show that no matter where you are in Ukraine, there's nowhere that's really safe.
Well, I mean, I hope you're staying safe, John, because obviously that's of enormous concern to us. But moving beyond that, so there are also new claims from Ukraine that Russia is using mercenaries from the Wagner Group to reinforce front lines to the east around, I suppose, Donbass and other parts of the east. What do we know about this?
This is something that has been increasingly discussed among analysts, and even the British military this week had put out a statement saying that they believe that the Wagner force, which is this paramilitary force that has ties to a close confidant of President Vladimir Putin, are increasingly in the conflict and on the front lines in this battle. You have to keep in mind, again, 145 days of war, and a brutal war at that has seen soldiers just chewed through on both sides of this conflict. The Russians came into this conflict with somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 troops. That's sort of the estimates that analysts have been working with. There's a perception now that the Russians, according to the British military, are even now moving in company strength in some of these maneuvers and skirmishes. And a company strength is about 100 soldiers. So, I mean, this is not these giant battle tactical groups that we saw at the beginning of the war where you had multiple of these units that had upwards of 1,000 troops. We're talking into the hundreds now of these movements, of troop movements, and they need the Wagner. They need to go to other areas in Russia to try to get more volunteers because they need more troops on the front line, and especially as rumors of a Ukrainian offensive in the south persist, Charles, they need to actually stretch that line out, and that means the Russians are going to need more troops in Ukraine.
John, we appreciate your reporting there, and do take care whilst you're in Lviv. AP correspondent John Gambrell there talking to me from the western Ukrainian city of Lviv.